But in my head, in my mind, I said, I'm going to read everything I can get my hands on. And if I can get away with it, I'm going to get away with it. Well, when the family would leave, I would run upstairs. Why would I run upstairs? Well, I would run upstairs because Tommy went to school. Tommy came home from school with books. And when the family would leave to go out on the outing, sir, I would race upstairs to that room and open up those books. And I would be in there trying to read as much as I can. He also had a tracer. A tracer would teach you how to write in cursive. And believe me, later on in my life, that cursive would really come in handy, especially when I got to my third plantation. I'll try to share that with you. Well, now, let's just say I'm maybe about 15, 16 years old. Time has passed. I'm still there with the arts. So I hear Master tell Miss Sophia, he says, I don't know if you noticed this, but I noticed something about Fred. His vocabulary has really changed. He don't even speak like a slave. He speaks like he's been reading. We're going to have to teach this Negro, we're going to have to teach him a lesson. So they farmed me out to Master Corvée. Now, Master Corvée was a poor slave owner. He only had 2 slaves. He had a young lady who was a slave, big and burly, and the reason he had her, and she was maybe about 21, 22, he had her because his mission with her was to team her up with other male slaves to produce more slaves. That was his mission. And he had another young man, so he only had 2. Now he got 3. That's me. The day I landed on that plantation, the day he whipped me. When I walked on that plantation, I walked such as. 6 months later, I'm like this. I got marks all over my body because he just about whipped me every day. He was known as a slave breaker. We called him the snake. We called him the snake because there would be times that he would say, I'm going off into town. In reality, he would get in the forest and he would tie his horse up and then he would sneak back on him. So we called him the snake, the sneaky snake. Well, one day while we was out there manning and putting the hay in the machine, I'm the center man, all of a sudden I started getting pain in my side. I go down. As I go down, the slave here said, Freddie, you better get up. You know Master Corvée is sneaky. He'll be right here in a heartbeat. So I got up because I didn't want no more whippings. I'm done with whippings. So I got up and I moved maybe about 2 feet and then I went down again. Well, when I went down, I couldn't get up. And I had my eyes closed. And when I opened my eyes, I noticed 2 feet standing right there in front of me. It was Master Corvée. And he said, Freddie, I fell into his trap, ladies and gentlemen, because he said, Freddie, what's wrong? I said, Master, my side. He said, where does it hurt, Freddie? I said, right here. So as soon as I moved my feet out the way, he commenced to kick me in my side. And when he kicked me in my side, I burrowed over. And then he grabbed a whip. Not a whip, but a what you call it? Help me out. A switch. And all of a sudden he started whipping me with the switch. Thank you very much. That's my hidden voice there. He started whipping me with a switch. And he cracked my skull, if you will. I got blood flowing everywhere. So at this time, I get up and I start running. And I ran all the way back to Master Art's house. I burst in the door and I said, Master, you gotta move me. They're trying to kill me. Master's only response was, Frederick, you need to go back. You're there for a whole year. You got 6 more months. And I'm like, Master, I can't go back. They're going, well, Freddie, either you go back or I'm going to whip you myself. And believe it or not, I got saved by Miss Sophia. I got saved by Miss Sophia because she jumped in and she said, Hugh. And then she paused. I just knew she was going to say what I wanted her to say. She said, let him stay tonight. Let him stay tonight. But I was waiting on, Hugh, let him stay forever. She said, let him stay the night. It was Friday night. Well, I went upstairs and got myself together, and believe it or not, they let me stay in the bed. I slept in the bed, y'all. Saturday morning, I get up, and I'm smelling that aroma is making its way up my nostrils. So as that aroma is starts to growling. As my stomach began to growl, I'm going down the stairwell. And as you all know, as you walk down the stairwell or you walk up the stairwell, 9 times out of 10, you can hear your feet hitting the stairs. Well, this time, I didn't hear my feet hitting the stairs. Every time I hit a stair, I heard my stomach going, grr, grr. It was growling because I was hungry. Well, trust me, as I got downstairs and I put my hand on the chair at the table, Master Ard said, "You need to leave now and go back." I just knew I was going to get me some pancakes, some eggs and some bacon and biscuit and coffee. "You need to go back." So I left. Now let me just cut off right there because I need to go back and I really need to bring something out really important. Master Ard would send me to the store. He would send me on errands. And believe it or not, he would pay me to go to the store. The question is, how much you think Master would pay me? Anyone want to answer? A penny, that's right. He would pay me a penny, all right? So what I would do before I left the house, I would go to the kitchen and I would get bread and I would stuff my pockets with the bread. And then I would make my way to the store. And as I got to the store, guess who was standing outside the store? Some little boys, little white boys, smart white boys. They were educated. They were hungry. I was hungry. Yes. So what I would do, I would go up to them and we start playing with each other. And then all of a sudden I say, "I bet you can't spell hat." And they're like, "Freddie, you playing, stop playing." "No, I bet you can't spell hat. And if you spell it right, I'll give you some bread." And they'll look at each other and start laughing. And then all of a sudden they come out their mouth and say H-A-T. And I'm like, "That ain't how you spell hat. I bet you can't spell it. That ain't how you spell it. H-A-T. That ain't how you spell it." Then I have them spell it. I trick them into spelling it the third time. Well, the reason I had them spell the words 3 times because the first time it didn't register. It just went to the frontal lobe. The second time it was making its way back slowly. It's like it's stretching. The H got back there, but the A and T was still lost somewhere. So the third time I got the whole word back there in my membrane. So now I know how to do what? Spell H-A-T. And I would pay them bread. And I would go see them almost every day. So between seeing them every day and getting paid that penny, guess what? I was on my way somewhere down the road to what? Freedom. Because I took those pennies, and guess what I did with those pennies after I saved up enough? Anybody want to take a guess? I bought me a what? I bought me a book. And the name of that book was the Columbian Order. And inside that book contained speeches. Speeches from greats such as George Washington, who at the age of 70 years old, I would have the opportunity 2 weekends in a row to go and hang out at Mr. Washington's house in Mount Vernon. Also, Thomas Jefferson, Edgar Allan Poe, and I keep forgetting the gentleman that wrote the Star-Spangled Banner.
Francis Scott Key.
Yes. Now, Francis Scott Key and Edgar Allan Poe, Frederick Douglass, I'm going into my back to myself, and I, all 4 of us share something in common. Anybody want to take a guess what it is? We're all from Baltimore. I learned those speeches. And then reading Tommy's books and Cursor and anything that I can, playing with those little white boys, whatever I can get in my brain, because I was hungry for knowledge. And that's why Master Ard moved me to try to break me with Master Corvée. Well, on this one particular day, when I got back, as a matter of fact, Master Ard told me that I needed to go back. I want you to pay attention to my right leg. I got back and I went to go over the fence. As I went to climb over the fence, question is, who was coming at me with a whip? Master Corvée. So you know what I did with this right leg? I took that bad boy off and I ran. And then, maybe about 3-4 hours later, I tried again, sir. I came back, and here I am calling myself sneaking over that fence. Well, guess what? That same right leg, who's coming again? Master Corvette. Well, I took that same right leg and I ran again. But this time, I ran off into the woods. And I was greeted by a free black man. And he said, "Frederick, come go with me." I went to his house, sir. He had his family in the log cabin. And they treated me to, you know, food. And they allowed me to stay the night. That next day, which was Sunday morning, we wake up and Master said, the free man said, "Freddie, come go with me." So we go out in the woods and he starts digging like a dog and he goes down and he picks up a rabbit foot. And he said, "Freddie, I guarantee you, if you take this rabbit foot and you put it in your right pocket, Master will not bother you again." And I said, "You know what? I'm not about all that superstition." So he took the rabbit foot and he said, "Okay, well, you don't be about the superstition. You go back and get your whippings." And I said, "You know what? Give me that." And I put it in my pocket. Now, this time, Sunday morning, I go back, put my leg over the fence, getting ready to climb over. Who's coming again? Master Corvette. But this time, it's a twist. Because he come up to me with no whip in his hand, and he says, "Frederick, welcome back. As a matter of fact, take the rest of the day off." I'm bewildered. I'm like, what's really going on here? And I say, "Wow, the rabbit foot is really working, sir." So he says, "You take the rest of the day off." And he says, "Look, tomorrow morning, why don't you clean out the barn?" I say, "Yes, sir." I'm still bewildered. So the next morning comes, which is Monday morning, I'm in the barn cleaning. Well, who's coming in the door? It's Master Corvette. And Master Corvette, he got a what in his hand? A whip. And he lashes out with that whip, and it ties around my left leg. As it ties around my left leg, he's pulling me. He's pulling me. So what I do, I manage in the midst of being pulled to go down and grab that whip. And then I lash it around my wrist, and I start pulling him towards me. Now, we start battling. It's a 2-hour fight. We start battling. In the midst, because we're tired, or he's tired, he pushes off and he said, "Frederick, you must want to die today." I say, "Master, I guess I'm going to die today because you ain't going to hit me no more." And then all of a sudden, we get back to grappling each other, and all of a sudden, here comes a slave. And Master, he sees him. "Robert, get over here and get Frederick off me." And all of a sudden, he comes over and he touched me right here, and I kick him. And he said, "Oh, Frederick, I ain't going to touch you." I said, "You touched me already. Now get out of here." So he ran. Now the next slave that come through the door, that's all he did. He came through the door, he looked, such as. And he shut the door and he ran. Now, the third slave, who I told you about earlier, the young lady, she was big and burly. When I saw her come through the door, I started getting scared. Because I knew if she get her hands on me, I was done. There was no fighting out of that. Well, luckily, she came and she looked, and she said, "Master, you didn't bring me here to fight Frederick. That's your fight. You go on and fight with him, because I'm going over here back out in the field where I belong. Don't you know, somehow I managed to push Master off me, and I stood back and I wiped my brow and I said, phew. And Master was coming at me again, and we got back in it again. Well, when it was all said and done, the question is, who stayed down and who got up? Who stayed down? Master stayed down. And I got up. And as time went on, Master would say to me, "Frederick, I could have whipped you that day, and I should have whipped you. Don't have me get after you." Well, as Master walked by me, you know, quite naturally, while he's standing, I got my head down, but when as he walked by with his back turned, I'm looking at him as he walked away, and I'm saying to myself, "You don't want none of this. You better keep on walking." That's right. Well, the last 6 months of my tenure there, he did not touch me. And he did not go out and tell the other slave masters. He was afraid to do that. Because he was known as the famous slave breaker. But he got broke by this slave. And from that day on, I was free in form, but I was still a slave in fact. And I saw him whip all the other slaves. And ladies and gentlemen, I tell you, when he whipped those other slaves, it hurt me. I might as well still been whipped. because the whipping he gave them was like he was whipping me the whole time. Well, my tenure ended, and I went to, they moved me to another plantation, Master Freeman. Everybody say free. Free. Master Freeman, he would work us during the day. But once that sun went down, guess what he would say? You're free to go do what you wish. Well, you know what I wish to do? I wish to go put a book in my hand. And I read. Well, as a matter of fact, I got brave because I knew Master was not going to come and see what was going on. That's how freestyle he was, because he was Master Freeman. Well, I started holding reading lessons. And sometimes I would have anywhere from 10 to 50 slaves gathered together out in the woods. And I would stand before them. Keep in mind, I'm only 16, 17 years old. Keep in mind that some of these slaves were anywhere from 10 to 50 years old. And I'm out there teaching them how to read. Somebody out there say Judas. Well, guess what? There was Judas among the congregation, if you will. Because Judas would go back and tell Master, Freddie out there teaching them boys how to read, teaching them slaves how to read. You need to go out there and stop that. Now, he wasn't telling my master, but they would go back and tell their master. And believe it or not, you had some of those slaves that were so in tune that they loved their master. They would fight over their master. They would drink over their master. They would run in races over their master. That's how much they loved their master. As a matter of fact, one year during Christmas holiday, I'm up in the tree reading, and I'm watching the slaves. And masters would have competition like betting. They would actually bet dollars on what slave would get the drunkest. They would even bet that so-and-so would start a fight because he loves me so much. And I would watch all this from the trees. Well, as I was stating, masters come in and they burst in and they broke up our congregation and they arrested me. Because, sir, they said I wrote the passages. If you remember, earlier I told you about the cursor. It was me who was writing passages so the slaves could go to the store. It was me who was writing the passages so the slaves could go to the cave, to the stables. It was me who was writing the passages so the slaves could go out and enjoy the Chesapeake Bay. Well, they arrested me and they took me to jail. And believe it or not, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. I was so happy in that jail cell. Even though outside those walls, there were slave masters out there saying, "We want you, Freddie. We're going to hang you. I'll kill you. I'll strip the skin off of you." But as long as I had that brick wall to separate us, and that nice bed, and 3 meals a day, and a shower, what they were saying didn't even matter. But Master Odd came in and he said, "Freddie, I have a good mind of sending you to Alabama. I can sell you right now for $1,000 and send you to Alabama." Quite naturally, sir, I got scared. Because I knew if I would have went to Alabama, my skin would no longer be on my body. But Master said, instead of sending you to Alabama, sir, he said, "I'm going to take you home with me." And when he took me home with me, believe it or not, he didn't whip me. He taught me a trade. He taught me how to be a caulker, a ship caulker, how to make what? Ships. And he allowed me to go out and get a job to sell my craft. And I did that. And the first job I got, they paid me $6 a week. I had to take that whole $6 home and give it to my master. Master started feeling guilty. You know what he did? Master paid me some money out of that $6. How much you think he paid me? $1.
$3.
How much? I heard someone over here say, huh? $3. A quarter. No, he paid me 6 cents. And he gave me the 6 cents because he felt guilty. Well, after so long, I managed to get me another job. This job paid me, believe it or not, $10 a week. And I went home and I gave Master $6. And Master, when I gave him the $6, he had nerve enough to give me a pay raise. Would you believe that? He gave me a pay raise. And sir, you said it earlier. How much he gave me?
A quarter.
He gave me a quarter. I became the richest slave around town. The reason being because there were no other slave being given a quarter. And you can only imagine, a quarter now nowadays will buy you one big gigantic cookie, if that. Back then, a quarter would buy you a house. That's right. So anyway, I took those $4 from the $10 and I stashed it out in the woods. Ma'am, I dug a hole in it. Every week I got paid, I took those $4 and I steady stashed them. Well, as time went on, I met my sweetheart. She's right there on the green board back there. Miss Anna Mary. Anna Mary was a free slave. Her and I, we began courting maybe about the age of 19. She believed in my quest of wanting to be free. Well, believe it or not, she supplied me with clothing, a sailor suit. She also had a friend who supplied me with a fake ID. She also sold some of her merchandise. And guess what? I had those $4 saved up. So I stashed all that, put it in my pocket, and next thing you know, guess what? September the 3rd, 1838, I was on a train. I was on a train going north. Well, on that train, I remember it like it was yesterday. There were 3 slaves that were back here, but they were running away. They were running. And here come down the aisle is the conductor. Tickets, ticket, ticket, tickets, tickets. Now I'm already scared as I don't know what. So all of a sudden, and he stops over here to these 3 guys here, and what he did, he talked very stern to them. Now look at here, you boys, I better not hear a sound of you, out of you. If you do, I will whip you myself. And those slaves sat there, they didn't say a word. But it's funny though, because when he got to me, his language, his demeanor changed. Sir, he called me sir. Sir, do you have a pass? I said, no, I don't travel with my pass or my ID. He said, why not? I said, because when I come home on leave, I felt like I don't need it, so I leave it at the fort. He said, oh, you're in the military. I said, yes, sir, I'm in the military. He said, you got an ID or a pass? I said, yes, I do. So I go in my jacket pocket, and I pull out a sheet of paper. Now, he's standing right here. The only thing on this sheet of paper is an eagle. So I put it over here, so he couldn't see it. Because I know if I put it right here or give it to him, I'm going back to slavery. So I put it right here. He noticed the eagle, and he says, all right, you sit here and you do not say a word. You be quiet the whole trip. Huh. Did he get a word out of me? No, he didn't. I wiped my brow of that sweat, and I sat there where I was quiet as a mouse on Christmas morning. I didn't say anything. And all of a sudden, we wound up passing Havre de Grace, Philadelphia, Delaware, and we landed into New York. And when we got to New York and that train stopped and the door opened, I have you know I was the first one off that train. I tell you, I felt free in that 1 hour as opposed to my whole 20 years in slavery. And when I got off that train, I was amazed at what I began to see. I saw there were black men that were in suits, tall hats, and when women would walk by, they'd take their tall hats off and they'd bow to the woman. And the women would walk with these long dresses on and had a little purse, and they looked like they were just gliding along. You ever been on them escalators at the airport that you don't have to walk, you just stand on it and it takes you? That's what they looked like. They were on one of those escalators because the dresses were so long. And all of a sudden I would look up and I would see around, I would see signs on poles. Wanted, runaway slave, $50. Wanted, runaway slave, $500. Wanted, runaway slave, $1,000. So I couldn't trust anybody. I don't care what color you were. I did not trust you because there was a feeling that if they catch me, they were going to turn me back in and they were going to gain that $1,000, that $500, or that $50. Well, I was approached by a black man. His name was Rucker, R-U-C-K-E-R. He was a lawyer. And sir, he invited me to his home. I went to his home, sir, and I stayed in his home. He fed me. He gave me some sleeping gear. He even gave me clothing. And he said, relax. Now, I don't recall if I told you my name, my birth name they gave me, Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey. I was kind of tired of that name. So we looked at changing my name. We changed it to Frederick Johnson. So I wore that name of Frederick Johnson while I was there in New York. The third day I come downstairs, guess who was sitting in the living room? Anybody want to take a guess? Guess who was sitting in the living room? Take a guess. Just take a wild guess. Who? No. There you go. My sweetheart Anna was sitting there. He had sent for my wife. Well, she wasn't my wife at the time. And believe it or not, attorney lawyer Rucker was a pastor as well. So guess what he did? He married us. And after he married us, he said, y'all must go north. Go north. So we left and went to New Bedford. And when we got to New Bedford, I was amazed again because there were big homes, carriages. I mean, black folks, white folks, living the life of riches and free. I wound up getting a job. I worked 3 jobs at one time. Yes, to support my Anna and myself and the arriving of our family, our children. Well, also, I read, as you might suspect. I read the newspaper entitled The Liberator. I read The Liberator, and I wound up going to anti-slavery meetings. So while I'm at one anti-slavery meeting, I'm sitting there minding my business. All of a sudden, coming down the aisle, I noticed this gentleman coming down the aisle, and he walked by me, and then he walked back, and he looked, and he went back again, and he came back again. He looked, he said, Frederick. Frederick? Your name Frederick? I said, yes, sir, it is. It was a black man. I said, yes, sir. He said, Frederick, how are you? I want to introduce you to someone. Come, come. You know, I'm nervous and I'm scared because I don't know, sir, if he can turn me in. So all of a sudden, I nerve up and I go with him. Well, he introduced me to this white gentleman. Well, the white gentleman was no other than William Lord Garrison. He shook my hand and he said, Frederick, I heard all about you. Then all of a sudden he pulls out this newspaper and he opens it up and there I am. He said, I wrote about you. Frederick, I would be elated if you would tell this audience about you and the life of being a slave. At this time, I'm probably about 23 years old. And I said, but sir, I don't have any formal education. My education is slavery. He said, I believe you'll do a good job. I wrote about you because I heard about you and how you handle yourself and how you taught yourself. So all of a sudden, I managed to make it to the podium, and I spoke, shaky, scared, and I spoke for a whole hour. And the majority of the audience participants were white. And would you believe, when I finished, Mr. Garrison took over the mic, and he said, are you just going to sit there? Did you just listen to a thing, or did you listen to a man? You listened to a man, a free man who was a slave. And all of a sudden, all these people just rose up and started giving me a standing ovation. And at that point, guess what? He hired me. And he didn't hire me for $6 and took my what? And took my money and gave me what? 6 cents. He didn't hire me, all right, and give me a pay raise of 25 cents. He hired me and he paid me $25 a week. And we traveled throughout, speaking about anti-slavery, abolitionists, how we were going to end slavery. And eventually, in 1845, I wrote my first book. My first book, The Narrative and Life of Frederick Douglass. And would you know, nobody believed that I wrote that book. They thought it was a white man who wrote that book. They even thought Mr. Garrison wrote the book, and they just put my face on the front of it. Well, guess what? Not only did I write that book, not only was it produced, but 5,000 copies of that book was produced. And also, I'm holding up 5 because it was written in 5 different languages. That book. It became a #1 seller in 1845. And not only that, one Saturday, my family and I, by this time we had our 5th child, Annie. And my wife was sitting in the kitchen because she was a little tired from cooking such a fabulous breakfast that I didn't get from Master Hard that Saturday morning. So she's sitting there with little Annie, and all of a sudden, in come through the door is Mr. Garrison. He didn't knock, he just burst through the door. And he says, Frederick, Frederick, you must leave. And I'm like, well, what's going on? You must leave because in your book, you told on your masters and you told on everybody. They can come get you. And I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. I got to speak in a couple of hours. And all of a sudden, my dear Anna, she's sitting there holding our baby, and she says, Frederick, leave. I'd rather have you alive than dead. Everything's going to be okay. And I looked, and once again, I said, Anna, I can't leave. What about you and the babies? Don't worry. We'll be taken care of. Leave. I want you alive. So I packed a few items, and guess what? I left, and I got on the ship, and I went to Ireland. At the time I got there, they were having a potato festival. And I stayed in Ireland for a couple of years. And that's where I told you, when I came back again, all right? I came back, sir, you know, a free man. And I also came back because my baby girl, Annie, at 10 years old, the light of our home had died. I told you about John Brown, and moving past John Brown, coming back again, the country had got past John Brown. And the reason they got past John Brown, and they stopped looking for anybody that they can catch who had ties with John Brown, even though they captured this gentleman because they heard that Frederick Douglass was about town. And they captured this gentleman that looked like me, and they hung him because they thought he was John, they thought he was me, but he wasn't. So anyway, about this time when I come back, it was about 1859, and believe it or not, it was the election. Time for the election. And there were 3 gentlemen running for election. The first gentleman, Douglas. I thought about it because he had my last name, and I didn't tell you that I got Douglas going back to New Bedford because there was a gentleman who had saw the play, Lady on the Lake. And he brought that name Douglas that was spelled with 1 S. And I said, I like that name, I'll take it. But what I did, I put another S on it. So when you say my name, you say my name politely, Douglas, not Douglas. Douglas. You make sure you pronounce that other S. So anyway, like I said, there was a Douglas that was running for president. I kind of liked him solely because his last name, sir, was Douglas, even though it was spelled with 1 S. I liked him solely because of that. But when I began, sir, to read his platform, what he was running for, it turned me off. Because he was, if you will, in a lesser word, iffy. Meaning that he didn't care if slavery continued, he didn't care if it ended. The second gentleman, I believe his name was Mr. Richardson. No ties. I didn't even believe in his platform. Because he was not even for, he was like over in left field somewhere. But then there was a third gentleman. You might have heard of him. Abraham Lincoln. Anybody ever heard of him? Okay? And believe it or not, right? And I'm just going to go there. If you're a fan of the Republican Party was born when Frederick Douglass